Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 555. This show is all about numerology lately, I think. For the 9.June 2019, Richard Saunders here with you from a secret location, an undercover stakeout in Sydney, Australia. Looking around me now. Interesting. Maybe in the future episodes we'll find out more. Coming up on this week's show, while you think about that, we have an interview with my old friend Ben Radford, the skeptical investigator and one of the hosts of Squaring the Strange podcast. He's going to be commenting on the latest news on Bigfoot. Yes, there is still news about Bigfoot and an investigation by the FBI. I kid you not. What have the FBI got to do with Bigfoot? Find out when I chat to Ben Radford coming up at the top of the show. After that, some great news from our friend Britt Hermes over in Germany. If you recall, she was being sued by a naturopath. We have some encouraging results from the trial coming up a bit later on in the show. Then I chat to the challenge coordinator from Australian Skeptics, Ian Bryce, who is a rocket scientist, amongst many other things. And he recently had an article published in the Skeptical Inquirer magazine about cold fusion, and looking like busting some myths to do with free energy and cold fusion. Then I head to Sydney Skeptics in the pub, which we had just the other night, where I ask pub-goers where they turn to when they're looking for good, reliable, skeptical information. How do you learn things? How do you find out about cold reading or cold fusion or cold feet or whatever you want to find out about online? Where do you turn? We ask pub-goers for their opinion. Then to round off the show, some rotten news for our friends from Embiggen Books in Melbourne. Unfortunately, that bookshop is closing down, which is a great pity because it's been a bastion of science and reason in Melbourne. Now, before we get into the show, don't forget to visit www.maynard.com.au. Maynard has got some more live shows coming up in Sydney. And just the other night, here in Sydney, we had a movie night with Maynard and Lance Leopard, and the crowd just loved it. We had a ball. A laugh a minute with Maynard, Lance Leopard. More movie nights coming up. Check out maynard.com.au for details and tickets. And if you're in Sydney, I hope you can get along. But now it's time... Ooh, what's happening behind me? This is very interesting, undercover here. But now it's time for me to reach into the glove box and find a... What have I got? A peanut butter sandwich, I hope. Okay. While I eat that and keep a low profile, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And now joining me on the line all the way from beautiful Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's my old friend Ben Radford. Hello, Ben.
Hello there.
Hello. Now, exciting news for me. Probably not very exciting news for you, but exciting news for me. In a very few short weeks, I will be visiting Albuquerque for the first time. What can I expect to see?
Oh, yeah, you can expect to see me because I'll be picking up at the airport. I'll have a big sign that says the famous Richard Saunders, and I'll pretend like I don't know you, and it'll be fun. We'll have a blast with it.
You're going to be dressed as a chauffeur, I hope.
Chauffeur or an evil clown. It all depends on my mood that day.
I see. And what mysteries and exciting things can you show me in Albuquerque?
Oh, we have so many things. We have. For those who don't know, for a lot of people, Albuquerque evokes, for people of a certain age, it evokes Bugs Bunny.
Oh, yes.
Of course, Bugs Bunny famously should have made a wrong turn in Albuquerque. And if you've watched the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote cartoons, it's actually not that far off. People are sometimes surprised that outside of the main cities, it looks quite a bit like the Wile E. Coyote cartoons with not quite as much of the embellishments and the going into walking off cliffs and exploding Acme bombs. But we will have a fun time. We will treat you to green chili and red chili, and there's all sorts of things here. There are various miracles. There's ghost stories. There's the VLA, which is the Very Large Array, which is the huge radio telescope that was seen in the movie Contact by Carl Sagan.
This is fantastic. So, I'm only there for a short time, but we'll see how much we can pack into that short time.
Well, we'll have a great time. I'm always impressed with your ability to bounce back after flying from Sydney to the States and back, and conferences, and I'm just in awe of your durability.
It's all smoke and mirrors, I promise you. And speaking of smoke and mirrors and odd sort of things like that, it's come to my notice via you, actually, a posting that you were relating to, that, and this is an odd story, the FBI have released files pertaining to Bigfoot. What is this all about?
Yes, it's made all the news, all the rage this past week or so. And I came across the story maybe 2-3 days ago on Facebook. I think it was on Sharon Hill's Group of Fort thing and a couple other places. And I didn't really, I've been super busy with other projects. I didn't really pay much attention to it. But all of a sudden I was being asked about it. So I dug it up. And of course, the first thing that people see are the sensational clickbait headlines. FBI investigating Bigfoot. According to recently declassified documents, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it all sounds very sensational if you don't look too closely at it.
And what happens when you look closely at it?
He said advisedly.
Yes.
So when you take a little bit of a closer look, what you find is it's interesting, but it's not quite as the headlines portray. So basically, what happened was that in the mid 1970s, 1976, there was a prominent Bigfoot researcher by the name of Peter Byrne, and he's still alive. I think he's in his 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But there were a handful of really prominent Bigfoot researchers, including Byrne and Grover Krantz and others. But Byrne had some samples of some unknown. Unidentified hairs and a little bit of skin that he couldn't identify. And he contacted the FBI and asked them if they would be willing to examine the hairs and see if they could figure out what it was. The FBI wrote back, and this is part of the trove of documents that the FBI released. There was a guy named Jay Cochran Jr., who was the assistant director for the Scientific Technical Division, and he said, yes, we said, we're the FBI, so we typically don't do these sorts of things. We mostly focus, of course, on criminal activities, but every now and then, on occasion, if there's a question of general research and scientific inquiry, we're willing to do that. And with that in mind, yes, we will examine the hairs, send them along. And Peter Byrne did so. And a few months later, there was a response back saying that they were deer.
Oh.
And that's the whole story. That's what happened. So it's so the FBI didn't open a case into investigating Bigfoot. What happened was that a prominent, fairly well-respected, certainly in the 1970s, Bigfoot researcher asked the FBI to examine some hairs, and they said, okay. And they looked at them, and they were deer, and that's it.
Ben, it sort of reminds me of the time that people, and you must get this too, people will ask me, in all the years you've been investigating the strange and the mysterious and ghosts and psychics and whatever, what is it that you came across that really stunned you and amazed you or made you change your mind or whatever? And I have to look at them and say, well, you know what? nothing yet.
Exactly. And, the analogy that comes to my mind is, and of course you've seen this much yourself, where there will be psychics and people say, see, the police listen to psychics.
Yeah.
And what they mean is that there's a high-profile missing persons case, and psychics, unasked and unbidden, will offer information to police, and the police, by their very nature, will take down the information. And if it's even remotely credible, they may look into it. But that doesn't mean that the psychics. That doesn't mean that the police are using psychics. It just means they took down the information and went on with it.
Well, and it's interesting too. I mean, I know we're going off on some tangents here, but that's fine. You mentioned the police psychics. Just in the last week, I was having a conversation with somebody, and they looked at me and they said, "Well, what about all the forensic psychics out there who solve crimes?" Which you would get that sort of thing too, but it means that there is a general opinion in the broader population that psychics solve crimes. It's a given. People just assume this is true. So they look at me as if I've lost my marbles, because how could I possibly deny that?
Yeah, how can you be so ignorant? You call yourself an informed skeptic, and yet clearly you haven't seen the 1 hour cable TV shows that I have.
Yes, that's right.
Where there's all this evidence. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we get that for all sorts of things, but really, people seem to comment a lot about that. And when you tell them that it's an urban myth, it hasn't happened, then it's very hard for them to accept that on the spot. And I don't blame them if they don't. I guess in a way they're being skeptical of what I'm saying. Right.
No, you're exactly right.
We have a lot to talk about, Ben. We have a lot to talk about in a few short weeks when I visit Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the local interesting sites and sampling some of that famous New Mexican chilies.
Yes, looking forward to it. It'll be fun. We will have a fantastic time.
And I'll certainly bring my roving microphone and we can do some reports on the spot. Looking forward to it. But until then, Ben Radford, thank you for your Bigfoot update.
Thanks for having me on. Always great to talk to you.
Hi, this is Dr. Pamela Gay from Astronomy Cast. Each week, Fraser Kane and I take our listeners on a fact-based journey through the cosmos. With our weekly podcast, we explain not just what we know, but how we know what we know about this universe that we share. Check us out at astronomycast.com and look for us in iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you download podcasts. See you online.
Now, it's very nice to bring you some good news from our friend Britt Hermes, who's currently living in Germany. From her web site called Naturopathic Diaries, naturopathicdiaries.com, Confessions of a Naturopathic Doctor. Justice prevails. Cancer quack Colleen Huber loses her defamation suit against me. And this was published on the 3rd of June 2019. So, in part, it says, on May 24th, 2019, the District Court, Landgericht of Kiel, Germany, ruled against naturopathic cancer quack Colleen Huber in a defamation lawsuit she brought against me. Huber filed suit in September 2017 over my opinions about the dubious treatments and human subjects research at her cancer clinic in Tempe, Arizona, USA, and also over my suspicions that Huber was cyber-squatting domains in my name. I was represented by Dr. Daniel Kurtz of the Law Officers Kurzfußbahn in Düsseldorf, Germany. Dr. Kurtz specializes in protected speech, media, and competition law, and is the only European member of the First Amendment Lawyers Association. Huber was represented by Dr. Christian Seifert of the Law Offices Zeller Seifert in Frankfurt, Germany. In a blog post from December 2016, I theorized that Huber, or someone in her close orbit, had registered domains using my first and last names to misrepresent my position on naturopathic doctors, and the word doctors is in quotes. You can view the archive of britthermes.com from the 31st of March 2016 here, and there is a link. In my post, I also wrote about Huber's dubious cancer treatments of intravenous baking soda, mega doses of intravenous vitamin C, and a strict sugar-free diet. Huber advocates against state-of-the-art oncology, especially chemotherapy and radiation, because she thinks these therapies strengthen cancer. The post goes on, it's quite lengthy and well worth your time to read, but at the end we have a thank you. Thank you! ! I was able to stand up to Huber's legal thuggery because the science and skeptic communities rallied around me. The massive fundraising efforts led by Australian Skeptics Inc. allowed me to cover my legal bills, so I could continue my PhD studies and focus on my pregnancy and birth of a healthy baby girl. I actually found out I was pregnant the same day I learnt of the lawsuit. It is emotionally and mentally exhausting to go through a lawsuit. I thank all of you who donated to my legal defence fund from the bottom of my heart. Since there is a chance of appeal, please stay tuned. The problem with frivolous lawsuits that attempt to crush the rights of freedom of speech is that it draws far greater attention to the issue than would otherwise be realised. It's called the Streisand effect. Colleen Huber chose to cross paths with me on a personal level, resulting in her exposing herself to criticism from skeptics and scientists who find her conduct reprehensible. At the same time, she unwittingly boosted my profile, which contributed to me being recognised last year with a John Maddox Prize for speaking out about the dangers of naturopathy and promoting science in the face of hardship. Thank you again for your support. I have been quiet over the past year, but I am now gearing up for more writing projects and speaking engagements. And that is just a couple of excerpts from her post, again posted on the 3rd of June 2019, and you can read all of that for yourself and much more by visiting www.naturopathicdiaries.com with a link in this week's show notes. And congratulations, Britt Hermes. Surf Coast Spring Skepticamp 2019 in September. CSCCS is Australia's longest running Skepticamp. This year we are celebrating our 7th year. Skepticamps are designed to give many members the opportunity to briefly, 20 to 30 minutes, present on a topic of their choice. Skepticamps have been run in hundreds of locations and in many countries since the first one was held in 2007 in Denver. The event will be at Aireys Inlet, an idyllic township located on the Victorian Surf Coast. Come down for the day or make it a weekend by staying a night or two in the region. Either way, just feel free to enjoy the location and the views. At the end of the day, we adjourn to the Aireys pub for a drink, a bite to eat, and of course, skeptical discussion. It's free to register, but we will ask for about $10 to cover the cost of lunch on the day. Financial support will be provided by Dr. Mick Vagg, founder of the event, and the Victorian Skeptics and the Morty Skeptics. That's Surf Coast Spring Skepticamp for 2019 on the 14th of September from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Aireys Inlet Community Hall. For more information, just Google Surf Coast Spring Skepticamp or follow the links in this week's show notes. Folks, I have in front of me the recent issue of the Skeptical Inquirer, of course, from the United States, the magazine for science and reason. Isn't that interesting? Because the Skeptic Zone is the podcast for science and reason. I might have nicked that byline from the Skeptical Inquirer many years ago. Volume 43, number 3, from May-June 2019. And I'm delighted to say that if we turn into the magazine itself, and we keep flipping, because I didn't bother looking in the index, because I haven't got... There we go. And we're on page number 40. Rossi's ECAT, expose of a claimed cold fusion device by Ian Bryce. Ian Bryce, the challenge coordinator for the Australian Skeptics. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Richard.
You've got an article in the Skeptical Inquirer. Now, in a nutshell, or a nutcase maybe, can you tell everybody what this... I think we've discussed this before, but just to remind us all, what is Rossi's ECAT all about, and why did you expose it?
Okay, well, one would think that a cold fusion machine might be impressive and developed by a university and perhaps in a big laboratory, but this Italian inventor claims to have one operating sitting on his desk, on his bench at home.
That's handy.
And that wouldn't be very significant in the normal course of events. But if you ask for backup on the credibility of this device, he can give you a list of 17 scientists, all of whom have made statements supporting it. So that's what got the skeptics involved.
So the basic claim, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's along the lines of free energy claim?
Well, not free energy. It claims to be nuclear energy released, so it's a step away from free energy. But his device, when he demonstrates it, he can have it sitting there for 8 hours, plugged into a power point, measuring the power coming out of the power point, which is about 300 watts. And if you measure the temperature of the steam, converting water into steam, and the flow of water going in and the temperature of the steam coming out, you can work out that it's developing something like 3,000 watts of heat.
Ooh.
So 10 times the output as input. And
I guess that's what I was thinking, free energy. And people say that buy my device and it'll run itself. And
yes, well, it's a step less than claiming over unity or free energy. He can describe the source and its fusion. The only problem is no one's ever harnessed fusion of any type, hot or cold, in their garage before. And in fact, his authorised biography says that he thought of it while he was in jail from a previous energy scam. So that's, yes. Oh boy. So that's probably not the same as a professor in a university saying they got cold fusion on the desk.
It doesn't instantly give you confidence, does it?
And yet 17 scientists, including 3 NASA PhDs, all gave presentations supporting cold fusion and low-energy nuclear reactions, and even supporting Rossi's device.
I'm at a loss to understand why they would do that, because it's fraught with danger, this whole cold fusion area.
Indeed, but Rossi was able to give demonstrations, many of them around the world, of his device producing 10 times as much output as input. And the scientists, we've got detailed reports from some Swedish nuclear physicists who saw it operating, who said they examined every wire and every pipe and measured all the electrical power and the steam and the temperature and everything. And they have no other explanation for all that power except for nuclear fusion, as Rossi claims.
And we just turned now, this is quite a lengthy article, is it? 9 pages, did you say? Something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm. And you've got some interesting diagrams here, but I remember chatting to you about this a couple of years ago, and how you examined what material you had, and what was your conclusion?
Yes, fortunately a lot of these scientists and journalists have put photographs and videos of the tests online, which we were able to study in great detail. Dick Smith drew the skeptics' attention to it, which is how we got involved. Yes. And an Australian entrepreneur approached Dick for a lot of money to buy the Australian rights, which would make everyone wealthy and save the planet. So Dick wrote back to him and said, "Sure, I'll invest my money in it, no worries. Just show me a report from a scientist who says that it works." And much to his surprise, along came in the email a report from a scientist saying that it worked. So that's how it came on my desk. Anyway, after a month or so of investigation, I figured out what was happening, how he was most likely doing it. And the thing is, the scientists were measuring the electrical current from the power point. They were measuring the current in the active wire and the voltage between active and neutral. And anyone knows that if you multiply current by voltage, you get power, whether it's AC or DC. What the scientists missed was that they were not measuring the earth wire. Now, earth wires are normally provided for equipment for safety, so that if there's some short circuit in the machine, the case of the equipment won't become electrical, because otherwise it could kill the people nearby.
Right.
So it's my hypothesis that he had retasked the earth wire to carry in extra power past the metering. And if this is true, then that's a pretty dangerous thing for the observers, to have this whole apparatus in danger, and all the water flowing and the steam and everything, and all the instruments in danger of becoming live.
Yeah. I guess another clue for us all is that this device is not everywhere. We're not all using it, are we?
That's right. Back in 2012, Rossi was making that claim we often hear, we'll be ready for production in 6 months. So in 2019, he says, we'll be ready for production in 6 months.
Well, that reminds me of all those years ago in, was it the year 2000, 2001, 2002, our friends up in Queensland. Now, they had the over-unit device, and I can't remember the name of it. It was called the...
There's quite a few from Queensland. There was the hydrogen-powered fusion car of Stephen Horvath.
That's a long time ago, that's right, yes.
And you won't believe this, but his son has got a new free energy invention that he's marketing. So that's my next task to investigate.
The original one, that was from the 1980s, wasn't
it?
Yes. But the ones that I'm thinking about, won the Bent Spoon
Award. It could be Lutech. Free energy generator. Yes. Now, that was a real free energy machine.
Oh, yes?
Produced output for no input at all, yes.
Wow.
On the power of permanent magnets. So we hopefully put them out of business too.
Well, that was a long time. But it was the same thing. They're getting ready for production any day now, looking for a few more investors. And they even made national TV. It's astonishing.
That's right. So perhaps that's why we need skeptics to be active, and we need scientists to have a curious bent. We skeptics have always been a great fan of magicians, and I've seen them perform many times, and they say to me, Ian, you can be easily fooled.
Yeah.
Don't take anything at face value.
Yeah.
And they said, we'll give you some clues. If you think you're being tricked, don't look for hidden machinery and compressed air and microwaves and things. Look for something in plain view that's being used in a manner you don't expect. Hidden in plain view. And so that's what led me to the earth wire.
So now I would imagine, since it's been published in the Skeptical Inquirer, there must be some of the scientists who have given their endorsement to this product. They must have read this by now. They must be aware.
Well, we hope so, yes. So one thing I say in the article is I call upon all these scientists to re-examine the evidence and to retract their statements supporting the ECAT. Hopefully this will put an end to the charade, because even he's still calling for investments, and on my calculations he's received something like $30 million from investors. Now, some of those might have been scamsters hoping for a quick buck by on-selling something that appears to work, but a lot of them would have been ordinary people looking to put money into something to save the planet, to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint. And that money could have been put on a better wind farm or a better battery.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a time you went up to the north coast of New South Wales 5, 6, 7 years ago to Mullumbimby. Was this the Rossi? Was this a variation?
Yes, it was. That was the first, early in the piece, when a guy in Mullumbimby was hoping to be the Australian representative.
That's right, that's right. And his heart was in the right place. And this is what you're saying. A lot of people have their heart in the right place. They want to save the planet. They want to cut carbon emissions and all the rest of it. And someone comes along with a gold tooth and says, here's my device.
Yes, and fools them all. That was an interesting case, because that investor then had approached Dick Smith for about $500,000 to buy the Australian rights, plus a bit of working capital for his retirement fund. And so I went up there and told them I didn't quite know then it was the Earthwire, but I told them there was a lot that was suspicious about this, and they should hold off investing until we found out what it is, which we did in a few weeks find out what it was. Now, that spoiled that guy's investment plan, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But what happened then was Rossi sought out different investors in Australia, and he found another guy, agent number 2, and I warned him. I told him that this is likely to be a scam. However, he went on to get $700,000 US from his own capital and from family members and other investors, which he sent off to Rossi for rights to sell it in Australia and Asia and Japan and South Africa and so forth.
Yeah.
So what do you think his chances are of seeing his $700,000 again? I think they're very low. And recently I contacted the first investor again and said, look, do you realise we saved you $700,000 because you could have gone ahead? And he said, you guys ruined me.
So he blames you. He blames the skeptics.
That's right. Blames the skeptics for saving him $700,000, which we would have otherwise got. So some people are a bit hard to make an impression on.
Well, again, if you think you're doing the right thing and you think you're on a good business opportunity at the same time, and someone like you comes along, Mr. Smarty Pants Skeptics, and puts cold water on it, I guess I can see why they would react that way.
Yes, indeed. But anyway, it's a lot of fun investigating these things, and the most we can do is publicise our findings and put out reports there, whether they're favourable or not. Tell you what, as you've often said, Richard, if we were to find a genuine phenomenon that lay outside known science and did something new to help save the planet, the skeptics would be delighted. We'd be happy to hand over our $100,000 prize, which we have available, and we'd be happy, if this was real, to have our name associated with it.
Yeah. And I've also made the argument many times. Oh, maybe that's Rossi on the phone now. I've made the argument many times. People say to us, so you don't want to find something supernatural or something like that, money's not real. I said, look, if we did, I could approach any media outlet and say, I tell you what, I'll sell my story to you because I've discovered a ghost for $300,000 or $1 million, and I would probably get paid vast amounts of money. So there's many reasons why we'd like to find something like this.
Yes,
and there is a financial reason. It would pay us.
Yes. Yeah. And Rossi's latest machine, one of his intermediate machines, was a 1 megawatt reactor. Like previous claims of cold fusion have claimed a total of 26 milliwatts of power. Now, you would know that that's a microscopic, about what a flea exerts in lifting its leg. Right. But Rossi was nothing if not ambitious. His first machine produced 3 kilowatts of power.
3 kilowatts?
Yeah, that's compared to 26 milliwatts.
Yeah.
And one of the machines he was selling is the megawatt device, which produced half a megawatt.
Yeah. Oh, there is. Yes, Ian's just flipping through the pages.
In fact, a 1 megawatt ECAT built into a blue shipping container. That's a million watts. So not 26 milliwatts, but a million watts.
Wow, that looks impressive, doesn't it?
Yes. Now, he claimed to have sold that. The problem is, if you keep track of what he says, he sold it several times.
Oh, okay.
And he wasn't able to name any of the buyers.
Well, it's very confidential, you see. Look, folks, if you're interested in the Australian Skeptics investigations into this sort of thing, to free energy, to cold fusion, whatever, have a look at the latest issue of the Skeptical Inquirer. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've covered similar sort of stories many times in the pages of The Skeptic, our own journal, haven't you?
I have indeed, yes. In this case, I wrote about this in The Skeptic in 2012, and a number of people pointed out that Rossi was still in business overseas, spruiking his device and getting more investors' money. So clearly that our previous publicity wasn't enough to put him out of business. So this time we're going a step further. Yeah,
well, the Skeptical Inquirer, I would imagine, would have a larger circulation. But even still, it is amazingly difficult to put these people out of business, isn't it, really?
It is indeed, yes. There's several analogies, like is it the Hydra with 7 heads? I think you cut off one head and it grows another one.
That's not a bad analogy.
Another one is whack-a-mole, the story.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
we play whack-a-mole a lot in the Skeptics.
Yes,
we really
indeed.
do.
Wherever you whack them, they'll pop up somewhere else. But we keep trying. We have a lot of fun as well, so we make good contacts.
We try. Anyway, congratulations, Ian. It's great to have an article published in the Skeptical Inquirer, and I always like to boast. I always open up the first page and run my finger down and...
In fact, you're a fellow of that
I'm
society.
a fellow. There's my name right there. So.
Indeed, yes.
So once again, folks, have a look at the article yourself. 9 pages, a full report by Ian Bryce. Ian, thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Allora ciao, io mi chiamo Professore Dave, io ti voglio insegnare tutte le cose sulla scienza. Parliamo di fisica, di chimica, biologia, astronomia, matematica e tante altre cose. Guardami su YouTube, arrivederci. Hey everyone, this is Professor Dave. I want to teach you about all kinds of things regarding science. I want to tell you about physics. I want to tell you about chemistry, biology, astronomy, math, and many, many more things. Come check me out on YouTube. The channel is called Professor Dave Explains. Take it easy.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave Explains.
We're here at Skeptics in the Pub, the first Thursday of the month, here in the Occidental Hotel in Sydney. Next month in July, it promises to be one of the biggest nights we've ever had here. More news on that when it becomes official. Oh yes, people are looking at me now skeptically. Tonight, the question is, we had a talk about metafact.io, right? That's the website. A fascinating talk about gathering information on the internet, how you discriminate, where should you go. You're obviously here because you're a skeptical fellow.
Yes.
What course do you normally take when you want to look up something in skepticism? Where do you go?
If I'm really serious about a particular topic, I will look up the usual places of confirming my biases and stuff, and then I'll try to prove it wrong.
Really?
And then you can sort of like work out from there what the sort of consensus is, what side seems to have the better facts, what side seems to know what they're talking about, and then if you're even more serious, you go and ask someone.
Well, that's always an option. But how have you gained your skeptical knowledge over the years? I mean, you have a working knowledge about general skepticism, I would imagine.
I think it's like getting tricked a lot. Yeah, falling for things and later finding out that was not actually true.
And do you like the good old stuff like pyramid power and UFOs and monsters and that sort of stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, do you mean they're false? Are you telling me they're fake?
I'm not saying anything. So, for example, I mean, I was into that before the internet because I'm that old. But for you, learning about all that sort of good stuff, how did you gather that information?
Yeah, I suppose the pyramids were a bit before my time in particular. I don't know, books in Wikipedia, Reddit is pretty good for having people argue about topics is usually pretty good because then they're motivated to get the better facts.
Yeah, what about things like YouTube?
It's a pretty rough place, to be honest.
Yeah,
it depends on the topic.
It is, but I guess, I mean, there's lots of things like documentaries by James Randi and things like that, which I would tend to view.
Yeah, if you find particular people that are knowledgeable, it's good to follow those. I really like, there's a science journalist, Potholer. He's got a YouTube channel about global warming and stuff. His series about global warming is just amazing, and he does a lot of debunking.
Potholer 54.
Potholer 54.
Indeed, he's been on the Skeptic Zone many years ago, and he was a guest once at one of our conventions.
Yeah. He's just top notch. Watch everything.
In fact, folks, I'll link to him in this week's show notes, and it's always worth visiting and subscribing. He is one of the best, Potholer 54.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No worries.
I'll have 2 whites,
People are insulting me because I'm wearing a dinner jacket tonight.
You look very smart.
Thank you very much. The night's question, gentlemen, is where do you normally go after hearing tonight's talk about looking for information on the internet? Where do you normally go to get your skeptical information? Tim Mendham.
Well, I'm going to go straight back to Google and look up Metafact.
And you're going to Google how to gargle, I think.
I think I will, actually, yes. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm talking too much.
Talking too much.
Where do I get my information?
Yeah.
I make it up.
I know. You read it in the pages of the Skeptic magazine.
Absolutely. That's my number one reliable source.
Thank you, Tim. And Richard, where do you normally go? Do you? We've had somebody comment that they might visit YouTube to get skeptical information. Do you do that?
I've used all those things. I've used Google and YouTube and Skeptic's Guide to the Universe.
Podcast too, of course, yeah.
Yes, I mean, over time you develop a sort of a relationship. You get to know who the good sources are and who the not so good.
Yeah. And you find yourself going to Wikipedia much for information?
Yeah, I've done that too, yeah.
Well, there's a wealth of information. The trick is determining which is the good stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Hello, and tonight's question is, we're asking people, after hearing tonight's talk, you're obviously here because you're a skeptical fellow of a skeptical mindset, but if you want to research skepticism, so you got your facts right, or at least have a working understanding, where do you turn to first? Do you have books? Do you rely on YouTube? Is it something like Wikipedia?
Yeah, I think generally it's important to seek out experts in their field, obviously, which can be very difficult. I've found what's helpful is finding out where not to look.
Where not to look?
Yeah, so things, websites like naturalnews.com,
right, yes.
for example, there's a lot of misinformation out there in disguise, and so it often masquerades as real science. And I think the more you sort of develop your critical thinking skills, the more the BS seems to rise to the top and is easier to spot.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
So I think I don't think there's any one website or anything that I go to necessarily, but I generally seek out experts in their field, other skeptical podcasts. Scientists, I think, are the number one go-to for me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But to get to a stage where you have a good, at least, appreciation or interest in skepticism.
Yeah.
Now, in my day, it was the odd book and TV specials and things like that. And the older I got, the more books I would get, and suddenly the internet exploded everywhere, and I can look up any documentary on YouTube I like. So earlier on, what piqued your interest in this skepticism?
I'd have to say early on it was definitely my interest in atheism, and reading Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion.
Right.
And that sort of led on to me questioning a lot of other things. And that developed into a hunger for knowledge, really. The more I learned about the way the world actually works, the more I wanted to know. And it just kind of snowballed, really, and it's been a fantastic journey. And so, yeah, the more I learn, the more I want.
I agree with you. It's endlessly fascinating. From everything from aliens to zombies, when you think of the alphabet. And what about you, sir? I mean, where do you go if you're interested in a skeptical topic?
Well, I've not been ever a computer owner or a smartphone owner or a TV owner, so. But I'm teaching a class of prospective uni students at the moment on research skills, and and I'm just advising them to avoid Wikipedia and blogs and so on, and to go for government sources like the ABS. Trusted sources that collect data and report that data in a scientific manner.
It's probably very sound advice. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Hello, we've got a visitor here from the United States. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Really well. Where are you from?
From Michigan.
What's that like? I've never been to Michigan. Would you recommend it as a tourist destination?
Yeah. I mean, we got the Great Lakes, and the Upper Peninsula is really beautiful. I mean, you can go canoeing and kayaking and all that kind of thing. Mackinac Island's really nice.
That sounds great. Now, we're asking people tonight, because we had an interesting talk about getting information on the internet. If you're interested in a skeptical topic, for example, or a topic to do with humanism or something like that, what's your first port of call? I mean, you naturally just jump onto Google, or do you go to YouTube, or what do you do?
It depends on the nature of the questioning, because I feel like, when I was taking college classes, I had a professor, and he said that some things are okay to, wiki, get on Wikipedia and look them up, but then some things you need more in-depth sources, and I totally agree with that, because I read books more than I watch YouTube videos and stuff.
Really? Okay.
And so I think a lot of it depends on how you learn best. Little snippets of information, I don't really like them. I like a lot of information. So when I flew in, I had been listening to an audiobook the whole way here, and I'm listening to one right now.
Audiobooks, that's a very good point you bring up. They're a wonderful source of information.
Yeah. The one I'm reading right now is by a guy named Matt Simon. It's called The Plight of the Living Dead. How real life zombies. It's called Real Life Zombies and what they tell us about ourselves. Basically, I can't remember the exact name of the title, but you get the picture. Okay. It's all about real life zombies. Because there's certain fungi out there that manipulate ants and stuff into doing things so they can keep reproducing, and I don't know, man, it's just all really interesting. And I feel like if I was looking that stuff up on Wikipedia, it just wouldn't resonate with me like it does with a book.
That's a really good point. So audio books are something you'd recommend?
Oh yeah, totally.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
Now, here's a rather somber note. This week, it comes to us from the newsletter of the Australian Skeptics, and you can subscribe to that at skeptics.com.au. Sad day for Embiggen. As you might have heard, Embiggen Books, this is a wonderful bookshop in Melbourne, is closing down on June the 22nd. Embiggen has been a perennial presence on skeptical bookshelves and at skeptic conventions from their beginning on Queensland's Sunshine Coast to their more recent presence in Melbourne. Refusing to stock pseudoscience, they have promoted science and skepticism relentlessly. But the trials of the book trade and publishing in general have finally caught up. So send Embiggen off with pride and at least a little cash in the pocket. Go down to 197 Little Lonsdale Street in the middle of Melbourne and buy a box load of books. I'll never forget the time. Now, when was it? 2012, maybe? I was at Embiggen Books with James, Randy and Maynard. And Randy took great delight in looking around the bookshelves of Embiggen Books. No doubt finding some of his own publications. But while we were there, Randy did one of his famous mentalism tricks on Maynard, where Maynard selected a book from a shelf, found a word, and Randy, using his amazing powers, told Maynard what word he'd found. And I don't think to this day Maynard has recovered. Great times we've had at Embiggen Books over the years. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. I'm still on secret assignment here, undercover. Well, in an undercover car park. Cars make interesting recording booths, I think. Coming up on the Skeptic Zone, I don't know, I can't look into the future. Reports from the United States, because that's where I'm heading. I'm heading there tomorrow, in fact. Oh, the joys of that flight over the Pacific. But in the future I can look into. We have a couple of meetings coming up at Social Skeptics Canberra with a link in this week's show notes to meet up. One about the misconceptions about beekeeping on Thursday the 13th of June. Now that would be an interesting one. I know my friend Dr. Eugenie Scott would love to see that one. The basic requirement for productive bee colony management are large food reserves of pollen and honey, and at all times the space for those reserves, brood rearing, and the storage of surplus honey. Get buzzing over at the Canberra Skeptics. Again, link in this week's show notes. And coming up on the 16th of July... Oh, I don't know what's going on here. That's exciting. Coming up on the 16th of July, we have another talk. What cognitive psychology can tell us about why we lay awake worrying at night. I often lay awake worrying about this show. Now that's from 6 p.m. and that's all about why we worry about things and insomnia. And that'll be a talk by Bronwyn Milkins. Head over to the meetup for the Canberra Skeptics to find out more about those two fascinating talks coming up. Well, I'm looking forward to catching up with my dear friend Dr. Eugenie Scott in the San Francisco Bay Area and other skeptics. I'll be visiting New Mexico for the first time to see Ben Radford. That'll be good. And whatever else I can get up to. And hopefully my dear, lovely, wonderful reporters will be sending me some reports we can all enjoy. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from a secret location, Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello everybody who listens after the music, the afterthought people who like to play the dice game. Joining me today to play the dice game is Ben Radford, who you heard earlier in the show. Hello again, Ben.
Hello there.
Hello. All right, Ben, it's quite simple. I've got a 10-sided die here. There it is, rattling around. I'm going to roll it 3 times, and we're going to get our listeners to use their psychic magic predicting power to predict what number will come up, and you can play along too. So I'm going to give it a good shake now. And Ben, what's your first prediction?
I'm going to say 6.
6. Okay, here it comes. 7. Oh.
Do I get points for being close like psychics want?
Yeah, almost. Okay. That's roll number 1. Roll number 2, what's your prediction?
It's a D10. I'm going to go 8.
8. Okay, here it comes. 1.
My psychic fails are they're failing in real time. This is so mortifying to me.
It's embarrassing. Okay, one last go.
Okay. 5.
5. Okay, here we go. Shake, and won again. Ben, the money is not yours this time.
Well, next time, Mr. Saunders, next time.
Thanks, Ben.